Hello everybody, my name is George Hall and today I'm going to be just giving the talk Follow the Law. Today I'm really focusing on, with an example of the law, all those acts of parliament as you can see on that photo, I'm focused on showing you the interconnectivity of family history, local history, and of course, because it's sort of comprised of them both fields, one place studies. Excuse me, so I think the key thing here is everything is linked. Splash it everywhere because, as I said, local history, family history, and one place studies are all fundamentally linked. And what do I mean by this? Well, one place study, to me at least, I suppose there's like a big definition out there as well you could bring up, but I also think it's to what you want to make of it. But the way I've always interpreted it is I study generally institutions, how institutions react to the local area, hence the local history element, and also the fact that studying these institutions is also local history. But also the individuals that make up the institutions, that found the institutions, that, for example, as a school, go to the institutions, or, for example, in the cemetery, get buried in the cemetery. With war memorials, I mean, it's obviously not as an institution as such, but you do have the individuals, but then you also have the individuals associated, and then you have the history of the war memorial. And obviously, if I don't tend to do big towns, I think that's part because the areas I'm interested in, it wouldn't be feasible. Well, it just wouldn't have been feasible for me to do that. I suspect then if you've got a village though, the same principles applies because you've got to understand who was living in the village, but who was at the top, who was at the bottom, for example. But one thing that then links all these things together also is the law and institutions, as I mentioned. Because also it depends on the structure of institutions that could further link them. But think about the institutions your ancestors interacted with. One place study of a school, like my grammar school one place study. What institution did it have to interact with? West Yorkshire, West Riding as it was when it first founded, a county council, the local councils, and these change. And these all create records. And the laws also, you've got to follow the laws because the laws also create records. And the legal framework of a local council is, for example, something that is more local history based, but also obviously fundamentally creates records, but you can't understand how something works until you understand why and how it's been structured and constituted. To consider this point further then, consider the legal basis for the census, because the census is such a fluid thing, particularly in our country, the UK, due to the nature of the fact it's an act of parliament. Therefore, it's important in understanding, if you want to go further, you've got to understand the legal basis for it. It's the same for birth, marriage, death records. You've got to understand the legal basis, the law behind it if you are to study family history properly. Because you can then use this to then understand why or why not something's coming up. But you can also use the law to move beyond just these few records. If you're looking at a business like my fourth great-grandfather, I think, must be, Henry Hopkinson's butcher shop there, that's the only photo we have of it from about 1903, went bust when he died. Well, maybe it didn't go bust, it disappeared. But what laws did they have to follow? He did go bankrupt, so what were the bankruptcy law? But he survived it. Why was that? What records were created? The bylaws are interesting because they are created locally. I have access to the 1870 bylaws of Hetmanwyke. I appreciate that this is boring reading. You don't want to be sitting there reading bylaws, I understand that, but what records did these create? He was not following hygiene bylaws. I mean, it's a bit embarrassing to be fair. Tax, again, is another easy example. Think of all the records, and these all come together in forming a one-place study. The Wheelwright case is a good example of understanding the law in a one-place study, because the Wheelwright case came from Wheelwright School complaining against what was Hetmanwyke, a higher grade school, the grammar school, my school I'm studying. I won't go into the details, but basically, because of the structure of the school boards, the legal frameworks of that was to create primary education, but then it expanded generally because these school boards were quite liberal-leaning to create secondary education. There was no legal basis for secondary education the way we understand it until 1902. The Cockerton judgment was done by the Tory government effectively because they disagreed with the way the school boards were being made. This act here and another act then allowed these sort of high grade schools to continue to exist, But our school sort of manipulated it, if you like, and made some very arbitrary decisions in institutions that they probably were breaking the law to a degree in order to maintain free education, free secondary education for those who wanted it. And eventually they were forced to comply differently. And that then summarises, I think, just a few examples of why you should follow the law, and not just the law, the institutions, the people. Because in a one-place study, or a study of family history or local history, if you do not understand what you need to find, if you're not sure what you're going to find, because no one is, at the end of the day, if this is someone who is a beginner, which we all were, but especially if you're thinking about in this event, I want to start one place study, I'm quite new to doing family history, I understand a very little about local history. If you're not at heart a researcher, just think about the people and how they interacted with the world, because this is what a one place study is, how institutions, how people, how towns interacted with each other and the world. And from that, I can assure you that you will find what you need. You will find the records, if only you were to just follow the law. And I think what I want to say at the end of this especially is, I really truly believe that all of these fields are interconnected, and they interconnect so beautifully, and that fundamentally, to understand family history, you have to understand local history. To understand your family history, you have to, well, not family history, what I'm trying to say is, to understand local history, you have to understand family history because these were the people that lived. But to understand both, you've got to consider them in the style of a one-place study, how everyone interacted with each other, and place yourself in the world, in that place, at that time. I hope this was of some use and there was some inspiration. I didn't want to go too specific. I think the problem with going specific is it limits one's vision. You get a bit of tunnel vision. And so what you think you've got to do is sit down and think as broadly as you can, as much as you can, about, what you can find, because I trust you. Even if you've got the nichest of one-place studies in mind, there will be records out there for you to use. Thank you for listening.